So at this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Danita, who will introduce our speakers. And then we'll use this microphone for questions and answers.
Good evening, and thank you everybody for your nomination and a vote to have me serve as president. I was going to say vice president, as president of this organization. I'd like to introduce our speakers tonight, and I do want to let everyone know that due to issues at the State House, we don't have a representative from the State House tonight, but we do have two individuals that are on top of what happens at the state level with the budget, and they have a very engaging presentation for us tonight. So I want to introduce from Policy Matters Ohio, Zach Schiller, who is the research director, and also we have Emily Campbell she is a fellow from the Center for Community Solutions, which is the organization that does the state policy in Ohio, for Ohio. So without further ado, we'll have, I don't know, okay, Emily's up first, and we'll have Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Danita, and thank you everyone for having us here this evening. I know that we're kind of pinch hitting a little bit here, but I'm happy to be here this evening to talk a little bit about the state budget, the problems facing the state of Ohio, as well as how those issues will impact you all in local government. You know, at our table at dinner, someone asked Zach and I who was the good cop and who was the bad cop, and the answer is we're both the bad cops. Going around and talking about the state budget, you know, when the weather's nice, it's a lot better. When you're driving around central Ohio in the middle of February in a snowstorm, having to go and give these kinds of presentations, it gets a little depressing, but luckily we've had a nice fall. So here we go. As Danita mentioned, I'm from the Center for Community Solutions. We are a research and advocacy organization, and I work primarily on public policy. Zach from Policy Matters and my organization do somewhat similar work. We both take a very hard look at state fiscal issues, and especially at how those issues impact low and moderate income Ohioans. But we do take a somewhat different approach to some of the answers and some of the solutions in the various programming. We had a lot of questions about a month ago before the election. Who was going to be governor? Was the Ohio State House going to go back to Republican control? What was going to happen in Congress? Were levies going to pass around the state? And today we have some answers to those. We know that John Kasich will be a new governor, which for us means that the state budget has to be introduced by March 15th. We're hearing rumors that it might be done earlier. We also know that, yes, indeed, the Senate has become more strongly in Republican hands, and the Ohio House has gone back to Republican control after a brief period when the Democrats controlled it. But there are still very many important questions out there. One of the most important is, how is Ohio going to fill a projected budget deficit for the next 2 years of about $8 billion? And I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about how we got there, what we're looking at, and then Zach will come up and take a look forward and talk a little bit more about the revenue and tax side of things. We all know that a major issue in the gubernatorial campaign was the economy, was job loss. We heard over and over and over again that 200,000 jobs within Ohio have been lost in the last several years. And the economy was on voters' minds all over the country on Election Day. According to a CNN exit poll, the economy was the #1 issue on voters' minds. 62%, a large majority, said that it was the most important issue. The second, very significant trailing was health care, which came in at 18%. And then Afghanistan and immigration both came in third, tied for third, at 8%. So it is obviously about the economy. The problem facing our state has certainly been exacerbated by the economic situation, but Ohio was facing a structural deficit even before the latest recession. Our tax system simply doesn't collect enough money to cover state spending, and for several years, state policymakers have been relying on one-time revenues and budget gimmicks to balance the budget. Today, we have what we like to call, at Community Solutions, a twin grip on state finances. We all know that unemployment has increased significantly over the last few years. In December 2007, before the latest recession began, unemployment in Ohio sat at 6%. Today, we're at 10%. Over that period, the number of unemployed Ohioans grew from about 361,000 to 600,000 today. This means that the state is unable to collect as much tax revenue as it was in the past. The income and sales tax are very heavily reliant on economic conditions, and when people start to lose their jobs, they obviously don't make as much income, they don't spend as much, those two go down. At the very same moment, and this is where the twin grip comes in, demand for state services is on the rise. As people lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance, they lose a lot of income, they become qualified for many state programs, including the Medicaid program, food stamps. They turn to the government to try and help meet their basic needs and the needs of their families. And we have seen that borne out on the number of people who are turning to government for basic assistance. In Cuyahoga County, food stamp the number of people using food stamps has increased 31% from December 2007 to July of this year, the latest month for which we have figures. Statewide, it's increased 47%. One question I often get is, why is Cuyahoga County increasing at a slower rate than the rest of the state? The reason is that in Cuyahoga County, we already had a lot of people on food stamps, so have a smaller way to go. The Medicaid program, same thing, increase of 21%. So now more than 2 million people in Ohio rely on the Medicaid program for their health care coverage, and it actually covers 1 in 3 Ohio children, so very, very important. In addition, cash assistance under the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families program has increased 33% across the state. People are hurting, we all know it, we feel it in our communities, and when people are turning to the government to meet some of their basic needs. The problem is, as I mentioned, that the state of Ohio has fewer resources to be able to meet those needs. The level of tax receipts for fiscal year 2010 is $3.1 billion less than fiscal year 2008. If you'll recall the last biennium, the projections of tax receipts could not keep up with the precipitous decline. So month after month, we were falling below those estimates. Things seem to have leveled out somewhat. The estimates are coming in right, and actually for fiscal year 2011, the few short months that we've had, tax receipts are actually above projections by a small amount. In order to balance the budget, in the current recession, Ohio has cut the budget multiple times, drained the rainy day fund, used one-time revenues and one-time savings, leveraged taxes on Medicaid providers, pushed debt and other expenses into the next biennium, and temporarily raised the income tax. In the current biennium, there is about $8 billion in one-time revenue, and that includes a significant portion of the federal stimulus money. Federal stimulus meant about $4 billion for Ohio, and that includes both the State Fiscal Stabilization Fund, which is helping out funding schools, higher education, and prisons, as well as an increased Medicaid match, meaning that the federal government is picking up a greater portion of the tab for the Medicaid program than they were in the past. What you need to keep in mind is that the easy solutions are all gone. We have no savings account left. The rainy day fund is completely drained. Any gimmick, any trick we can come up with, we've already used. In fact, they have announced that they expect to have about $400 million in lapses. These are expenses probably taken in this year that they're going to lapse into the next biennium. So are pushing expenses into the future. And as you know, Ohio has to balance its budget. It's not like the federal government where we can do deficit spending to try and cover these. When when tax revenues decline and we have a budget deficit, we have to solve it immediately. So these are problems that problems that must be solved now, and we can't delay things any further.